Hey there, Mr. Reddit here. Welcome back to another episode of r/entitled Parent Stories. Our first story we'll be reading today, Karen thinks she owns my house. After that, my cheating ex-wife Karen now has to pay me child support. And after that, entitled kid got away with everything because his mom was our teacher. Now for every thumbs up this video gets, one Karen does not get to take your house. You're gonna need a good lawyer. Good luck, Reddit boy. So please smash that like button. And if you're new, subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. Karen thinks she owns my house. Characters. We've got entitled mother, we've got entitled kid, we've got me and my girlfriend. Background. I live in a rather quiet apartment building, but as soon as this crazy jerk moved here, I knew that my situation was going to blow up. I always try my best to be kind to my neighbors, and it wasn't any different for entitled mom. I enjoy having small get-togethers in my apartment with a couple of my neighbors, so when entitled mom and her annoying as heck kid moved into the building, I decided to invite them to a weekly Friday adults game night. Don't judge, this was all before lockdown. The party was set to begin at 7, but entitled mom came a good hour late. Our parties are for adults because we have lots of drinks and some other things. Entitled mom decides to ignore the clear as day rule that kids aren't allowed, and she decides to bring her little jerk to my house. As soon as I see the kid, I tell her, no kids allowed. But then she goes and says, "It's okay, he has my permission." I sigh and ask her to come back in 10 minutes. Now me and the neighbors have to clear all of our stuff and pack them in the cupboards. She and her little jerk come back in 30 minutes and immediately start eating all of my food. I'm a really non-confrontational person, so telling them to stop was a big no-no. This isn't even the real story yet, it's just some background to explain the crap show that's about to happen. The story. Lockdown happened. Girlfriend was staying at my place during lockdown because our parents both have pre-existing conditions. We went through the whole process. So one day, I was out of the house getting groceries when girlfriend called me crying and saying she didn't feel safe in our apartment. Apparently, girlfriend was taking a shower when she heard someone. She thought it was me, and she opened the curtain to see entitled kid, that little jerk, standing outside the bathroom door. She screamed and slapped him and kicked him out. Hearing this, I immediately rushed home to comfort her, having absolutely no clue how that little jerk got into my home. As soon as I got home, I see entitled mom standing outside my apartment banging on the door without a mask. I tap her on the shoulder and start to explain to her that she really needs to control her kid. I tried to be as nice as possible, even though I was seething with anger. I tried to tell her that I understand he's going through changes, but breaking into people's houses and doing things like this wasn't okay at all. Before I could finish, entitled mom goes off on me. She starts screaming at me that her son didn't break into anyone's house and that girlfriend had no right to hit him. She said she was going to call the cops and tell them that we assaulted the little jerk. Even though at this point I'm literally about to get her, I try my best to remain calm and ask her how her mistake of a son got into my house. The entitled mother starts screaming at me, and in her anger, she lets it slip that during my neighbor's meeting, in the background section, she took one of my apartment's keys. My brain just shuts off. Girlfriend comes out hearing the commotion and apparently heard that entitled mom stole my keys. Girlfriend goes off. She says she's calling the cops for stealing, breaking and entering, an invasion of privacy. At this point, my brain is still processing what entitled mom just said. Entitled mom screams back that in her rental agreement, she was given access to all of the amenities of the apartment and she somehow believed that my house belonged to them too. Keep in mind, I own my apartment. Girlfriend and I kept strong on her promise and called the cops right then and there. Entitled mom got arrested, but I don't know what happened from there. All I know is that I changed my locks, got only 2 new house keys, gave one to my girlfriend and kept it, and bought one of those camera doorbell things. Edit. Wow guys, thanks for the huge response. I got a lot of questions asking how old entitled kid is. I don't know exactly how old he is, but he looked to be about 15 or 16. Edit 2. Holy moly. When I just posted this, I tried to respond to everyone's comments, but now that's getting kind of difficult. I'm going to try to make some broad statements, and I hope it answers your questions. My girlfriend and I are feeling much better. I showed her the post, and we went over a couple of the responses together. I have no clue what's wrong with the kid. He might be a little mentally unstable, but other than that, I have no clue why he acted like he did. Also, I want to take a moment to thank you guys for all of the updates, the Wholesome Award, the Silver Award, and the Hugs Award. Thank you guys for all the help you offered, and I hope I answer some of your questions. Thanks for being so kind. This is my first time making a single post, so I was kind of worried I was going to get trashed on for not handling the situation properly or something. But you guys have been nothing but kind. Have you ever had a neighbor who just loved to overstep boundaries? If so, what did they do? Please let us know. I've got a co-host who does, I tell you that much. My cheating ex-wife, Karen, now has to pay me child support. Grab a cup of coffee or tea, because this is a long story. I apologize, but I hope it's worth your time to read. My revenge began with discovering my wife's infidelity. Let's call her Carrie. After 14 years of marriage and 3 kids, I saw a text appear on her work phone for just a few seconds that would forever change my life. It was a message that had no business being on anyone's work phone. It was on the lock screen, and the sender's name was visible. Let's call him Perry. Background: I married Carrie when I was 25 and she was 22. I was teaching high school at the time, and she was an RN. After having our first kid, Carrie became a stay-at-home mom. Money was tight, so I took on an admin role in my department and coached 2 sports for the stipends. We made it, and after a few annual pay raises, I stopped coaching and took advantage of a program to earn an administrative credential. Once I made the jump to administration, our last kid was ready for preschool, and Carrie decided she wanted to go back to work. Nursing jobs are always available, but they're not always the best positions. Carrie pretty much had to start back at the bottom, working alongside nurses that were a lot younger than she was, and could work back-to-back double shifts that took a toll on Carrie. When she asked her supervisor about other positions, she was told that without a BSN, she wasn't going to move up. At the time, Carrie had only the 2-year ADN. I told her that between preschool, after-school rec, and my retired mother, who was always willing to pick up the kids from school and watch them, I'd support her getting her BSN. It took her 3 years, but eventually she had her BSN and was promoted to a better position at the hospital. Things were good for a while. We had plenty of money, so finally moved into our own McMansion, bought a new car, etc. I'd moved from school admin to the district admin, so I had more time to spend with Carrie and the kids. She was working a more predictable schedule, and even with my often long hours at work, this change allowed us to finally take vacations to all the places we had put on a list during our honeymoon. She kept that list in our wedding album. At some point, years later, I noticed she was carrying 2 phones with her. When I asked her about it, she said that it was a phone provided by the hospital. I didn't question her explanation because my district had also given me the option of a phone or a phone stipend, which I took instead. Again, months went by and I thought we were a happy, perfect family. I charged my phone in our den while she charged her phones in our guest bedroom that doubled as a computer room, so we could keep tabs on the kids while they surfed the web. I was updating software on the computer when I saw a light around her work phone. She had a habit of always turning her phones face down when charging them. Out of curiosity, I reached over to the phone and flipped it over. A message had popped up on the lock screen asking her when she'd like to hook up again. I also saw that Perry sent it. The world stopped around me. I just froze. My first thoughts were, what the heck was that about? It's her work phone. That kind of message gets people fired. Then it hit me. Was Carrie cheating on me? It's amazing how the brain works. I suddenly started remembering a lot of things Carrie had done that seemed odd, but I'd either dismissed them myself or immediately accepted her explanation. She was always working out of the room to answer a call or return a text and claimed that it would violate HIPAA if I overheard her talking about a patient. I accepted this because education has similar privacy laws regarding students. She would sometimes come home with the faint smell of cologne on her clothes and claimed it was from helping to move male patients. Again, I accepted this at face value, but it always struck me as odd how it seemed to be the same scent of cologne. Once the proverbial barn door was open, I started seeing a lot of things that I'd missed before. Our love life had cooled off considerably, which wasn't helped by her having to leave the house at odd hours to fill in for other nurses that called in sick. I also recalled where I'd seen the name Perry before, and a call to the hospital confirmed he was a doctor there. For the next week or so, I was walking around in a daze trying to put all of the pieces together. One of our kids had left a book in Carrie's car, so it was an excuse to visit the hospital. Carrie had told me personal visits were frowned upon. My kid went up to get Carrie's car key. I had forgotten my key to her car at home. I talked to a nurse in the lobby and joked about how work phones seem like a blessing, but all they do is put you on call 24 hours a day. This led to her eventually telling me that the hospital was too cheap to give cell phones to nurses, so only high-level executives got them, which didn't include Carrie. With pretty much everything confirmed, I took some personal time off the next day to talk to a divorce lawyer. The news she gave me was horrible. We lived in a community property state with no-fault divorce. I made more money than Carrie. She had been the primary caretaker of the kids, and we'd been married for more than 10 years. Basically, if I filed for divorce, I'd be done for. Lose the house, pay alimony, she'd get a huge chunk of my retirement, and I'd pay child support for the next decade, unless I was lucky enough to be awarded joint custody. The worst thing she told me was that it didn't matter that she cheated. It didn't matter. I was crushed. There was only one person I could trust with this kind of information. She was a fellow teacher that had also made the jump to administration, but was stuck at a school site. Let's call her Anne. Anne had been married at 19, but her marriage was annulled when he got some other woman pregnant. Since then, she had focused on her career, and we had found we were kindred spirits in a lot of ways regarding K-12 education. I talked to Anne. She said something to me that changed my whole mindset. If you don't like the hand you're dealt, change the deck. I realized I had two problems. I made more money than Carrie, and she had more time than me to be the primary caretaker of the kids. The second issue was actually kind of easy. At every district office, there are jobs that are fast tracks to higher positions, and there are jobs that administrators suffer through, like mess or KP duty in the military. One of these dead-end regulatory positions was open again. Ambitious administrators leave after a couple of years when a better position opens up. I sat down with our district superintendent and asked about being transferred to that position. At first he was shocked, but I told him that it was my time to take one for the team, and it would fill a hole in my admin experience. He agreed. It was really just crunching numbers with no personal or student interaction, so I could set my schedule, even take a laptop home and work there. With my new free time, I began taking the kids to school, picking them up from school, not leaving them in after-school rec or having my mother watch them, and taking them home. I'd help them with their homework, make dinner, etc. While the end goal was to become their primary caretaker, I can't explain how much I really enjoyed taking a more active role in their day-to-day lives. My salary hadn't been reduced, so I needed to find a way for Carrie to make a lot more money than she was in current nursing position. I remembered Carrie being mad after she had earned her BSN, and a supervisor told her, "In the future, bachelor degrees will be worthless, and everyone will need at least a master's degree." Carrie had worked hard to get her BSN, and that supervisor's comment really upset her. I talked her into starting an MSN program. I told her that since I had a much more flexible work schedule, I would keep taking care of the kids. She was reluctant at first. Then I said, "You could have every evening free to study or go to class, whatever you want to do." I saw her eyes immediately light up, probably thinking that she could spend more time with Perry. To make sure she was actually completing her MSN courses, I paid her tuition and fees directly to her university. It was going to take her between 2 and 3 years to finish. Those years were rough at times. I could tell every time she was rushing off or coming back from seeing Perry. There was an excitement or sense of satisfaction in her eyes that just wasn't there when she was doing her coursework. I had to either smile or pretend I didn't notice. My temper got short at times, and I found myself in arguments over petty nonsense. A couple of times, I almost blew the whole charade, having to bite my tongue and apologize rather than scream insults at her that she deserved. Anne remained my confidant through all of this. I'd recommended her for my previous fast-track position, and she joined me at the district office. Anne was qualified, hardworking, ambitious, and only needed her foot in the door to impress the higher-ups. I even got a few pats on the back for recommending her after she'd impressed everyone. Anne and I started having our own affair. It wasn't some hot-blooded, passionate romance, but two friends giving each other what they need. Without Anne, I wouldn't have been able to maintain the charade of being oblivious. But when Carrie would come home smiling after spending time with Perry, I was able to hear it, smiling back because I had my own lover. About 3.5 years later, Carrie completed her MSN and was promoted at the hospital. Her salary went up substantially and was now higher than mine. When the kids and I made her a congratulations dinner, I made a joke about her being the breadwinner for the family, and she laughed, joking back I should be a stay-at-home dad now. A month later, I went back to the lawyer, who didn't remember me at first, and told her the financial situation had drastically changed. With these new facts, she drafted the petition and filed it. When the kids were with my mother, I had Carrie served. The deputy knocked on our front door, and I let him in, pointing at my wife. He asked her name and then handed her a copy of the divorce petition. With the deputy standing there, I told Carrie I knew all about the affair with Perry, but I didn't tell her how long I'd known. I told her to go be happy with her doctor lover. She screamed at me, tried to lie, and then made the mistake of rushing toward me. The deputy stopped her and warned her that she would go to jail for violence too. He suggested she pack a bag to stay somewhere else. Carrie left after I promised not to tell the kids about what she was doing. I didn't tell the kids, but I told my mother, who told my sister, who told her kids, who told their cousins, my kids. It took a few days, but eventually the kids knew that Dad was divorcing Mom because she had a boyfriend. In the end, the court granted the divorce, giving me primary custody of our kids because I was already their primary caretaker. I kept the house with the promise I'd refinance to buy out Carrie's half. She was ordered to pay child support, and I used that fact to negotiate with her to give up any rights to my retirement if I bought her out. I was able to refinance my home. It was the era when banks threw money at everyone to buy or refinance a mortgage, and with a little money borrowed from my parents, I bought out Carrie's community property interest in the home and in my retirement. The day she signed all of the paperwork with my lawyer finally ending any possible financial obligations to her was the happiest I'd been. I felt like I could finally breathe. I celebrated with Anne, who'd been my rock through all of it. I'm not ashamed to say that through the years, I'd cried many times in her arms. Anne and I would eventually marry. She got promoted to a higher position, and I was convinced to take back my previous position at the district when my youngest reached high school. Carrie and I got along well after the divorce. We took the kids to family therapy and worked out this co-parenting thing. For the first few months, the kids kept asking her why she needed a boyfriend when Daddy was there all along. Between the kids and the therapist raking her over the coals, I don't have anything to say at all. Carrie missed a lot of time with the kids because of her now legitimately busy work schedule, and I actually felt bad that my kids were missing time with their mother, so encouraged them to talk to her on the phone instead. When Carrie found out that I'd proposed to Anne, she congratulated me. I told her it's okay for her to marry Perry too. She got sad. She told me that Perry had started seeing another woman, a younger nurse at the hospital, because with her new promotion, she didn't have time for him, and when they did get together, she wasn't fun anymore. My ex-wife, the woman who cheated on me and destroyed our marriage, was looking to me for sympathy. I had none to give. What I had was years of anger and frustration, years of knowing that some other man had been with my wife. I'd lost weight from not being able to eat. I'd suffered hypertension and had to confide in my doctor why it wasn't the stress of my job. I had to listen to my dentist complain about how I was grinding and listen to him tell me that I needed dental implants if I kept it up. There were times where I had to be intimate with Carrie to keep up the charade, fortunately infrequently. But in the end, it was all worth it. Sure, Carrie got a big payout when I bought her out of the house in my retirement, which she was trickling back to me through child support, but she lost everything else. Her kids only saw her every other weekend and spent a couple of holidays with her. Perry dumped her, and he was no great catch anyway, since he was twice divorced with 5 kids and paying alimony and child support through the nose. I kept my kids, my house, my income, my retirement. I got Anne, and I am genuinely happy. All in a community property state with no-fault divorce. If that's not pro-revenge, then I don't know what is. Entitled Kid got away with everything because his mom was our teacher. Cast. We've got Entitled Kid. We've got me, the antisocial nerd. We've got Teacher, Entitled Kid's mother. I don't have it in me to call her Entitled Mom or Karen because she was always so nice to me. We've got my dad, and we've got Vice Principal. I first met Entitled Kid in kindergarten. We became close friends and had many play dates. His attitude started to change in 2nd grade. He would say horrible things to me just to look cool in front of the other kids. It started off as just some mean nicknames, but then he would point out flaws about my body to his friends while I was nearby. 3rd grade was a little easier since we were put into different classes, but whenever he came over to my house, he would break and ruin my toys, delete save files from my video games, and try to get me in trouble with my parents. I asked my dad to stop inviting him multiple times, but this is pretty much how the conversation would end up. My dad: Teacher and her husband were busy and asked me to babysit. I couldn't say no. Me: Can you at least get him to stop deleting stuff from my DS? I worked hard decorating the lands in my Sims Kingdom game. He's your guest, so you have to let him play on your DS. I don't want to hear any more complaints. It got to a point where I would just let him play Lego Star Wars alone while I would play Webkins on my parents' computer so that I wouldn't have to interact with him. At least my complaints weren't entirely ignored since my parents tried to get me a different teacher for 4th and 5th grade. Students at my school would always have the same teacher during those 2 years. Unfortunately, their request was ignored, and I ended up having teacher along with Entitled Kid. Some of the staff at the school not only thought Entitled Kid and I were still friends, but they also thought we would develop some sort of puppy love. My mom told me that one staff member thought what we had was so cute, and she could already hear wedding bells. Keep in mind, we were between 9 and 10 at the time. I never thought of T as a bad person, just a bad teacher. At the beginning of each year, she would give this long speech about how she doesn't give her kids special treatment, but that would turn out to be false. Entitled Kid would even brag about how he's done stuff that should have got him suspended, but his mom would make it so that never happened. During the first half of 4th grade, Entitled Kid and I were literally seated back to back. He took this as an opportunity to get more physical with his bullying. He would hid and steal stuff from my desk, headbutt at the back of my head, pull his chair out to knock me over, and pull on my clothes. And what would teachers say about this? Entitled Kid, stop it. That's it. Would he stop? No. Then one day I snapped. We were doing presentations, and I was already nervous because I hated public speaking. While someone else was presenting, I went over my work in my head. I didn't notice Entitled Kid was pulling my chair back until after the 3rd time I pulled it forward and felt a tug. I saw his hand on the leg of my chair about to pull again. I told him to stop, but he only laughed. As he pulled my chair, I lifted the back of my chair. Then, using all of my weight, I brought it back down on his hand. He screamed. Teacher. Entitled Kid, we are in the middle of presentations. Entitled Kid. Mom, she's crushing my hand. Me. Why was your hand down there to begin with? I was grabbing my pencil. Me. Your pencil's on your desk. I can see it. Teacher. Enough. Crazy Dorito Queen, get your chair off his hand. Entitled Kid, go to the nurse's office. I didn't break any of his bones, but there was a circular bruise on his hand for a while. Teacher changed the seating arrangement so that we were both on opposite sides of the classroom. I ended up developing anger issues after this. People started to hate me because how dare I hurt this golden child, but I didn't care. I just wanted them to know that I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. I know this was a small thing to snap over, but between Entitled Kid, adults not listening, and the presentations, I had had it. It didn't end there. Entitled Kid just went back to the same old thing, but I would end up screaming at him. In 5th grade, when he found out I had also signed up to play the trumpet in the school band, he begged me to change instruments, even after I told him my parents already rented one. He tried to continue to bully me in middle school. His mom wasn't there to baby him anymore, so he didn't get away with it easily. As a result, he tried to get me in trouble instead. Vice Principal. Entitled Kid told me this morning that you hit him yesterday. He also has a witness. Me. He's just trying to get me in trouble, and his friend is in on it too. He's been doing this since elementary school. Well, you kids aren't in elementary school anymore. Straighten up, or I will have to give you detention. Me. But I didn't even do anything. Vice Principal walks away. I told my dad what happened, so he went to talk to the Vice Principal. What really upset me was that he said the exact same things I said, but the Vice Principal actually listened to him. At least I never had a problem with Entitled Kid again after this. The last thing I ever heard about Entitled Kid was during my sophomore year of high school. He went to a performing arts school while I went to the high school in my district. One day, a girl from that school transferred to mine, and one of the first things she told me was how glad she was to get away from this jerk who had been messing with her, and that none of the teachers would do anything about it since they didn't want to risk his future music career. She was shocked when I guessed his name right. Apparently, he became even more of a jerk when he entered high school. He thought he was a better musician than everyone, and he expected girls to just go on dates with him without arguing. I really hope he's matured over the years. Am I the jerk for telling my sister that she is not an adoptive parent? I, 34 female, have 3 kids. 2 are adopted from China. 3 years ago, we got matched, and we decided to announce it to the family at our Christmas party. When we said, we're adopting, the first words out of my sister, now 32 female, mouth were, me too. I was very confused as she had never seemed interested in adoption, so I asked her what she meant a few minutes later, and she started telling me all about the new corgi she was getting. I was kind of annoyed because I feel like it's weird to compare the adoption of pets to humans, but I let it go at the time. Fast forward about 7 months when we were home with the girls. They were 4 and 7, and the grieving process was very short and hard. It was just a difficult adjustment in general. When I tried to call my sister, she kept comparing it to her dog, which she had gotten a few months earlier. Like, I would tell her some things that are triggering to my daughters, and she would say, "Oh yeah, Howie had trouble with that on the first few days, but we just kept exposing him to it, and he got used to it." Howie is her dog. First of all, that is terrible advice. And second, she would say it like she was some experienced parent giving advice to a new mother. She has a stepson, but he was 11 when she met him and 13 when she became his stepmom. She has not adopted him, and her husband choose for her not to be a parental figure for him. So I don't really think it's her place to be giving out parenting advice. Well, the last straw was that I go to a Zoom adoptive parents support group, and yesterday we had an event type thing where you could bring in a friend or someone who may be considering adoption and give them a little insight from the parent's point of view. My sister asked me to invite her as she said she may adopt one day. I did, and when they started talking about how sometimes in orphanages, hygiene isn't taken care of, aka they don't have their teeth taken care of, and often wear the same clothes for multiple days in a row, my sister started talking about how it was similar to how her dog was treated in the shelter and how annoying it was to have to take him to the vet for his teeth because they weren't properly cared for in the shelter. Everyone in the meeting looked very uncomfortable, especially the woman in charge, who is an adoptee. After the meeting, we were talking on the phone, and I tried to tell her nicely that was an inappropriate thing to say when talking about inhumane conditions of actual people, but she accused me of not caring about inhumane conditions of dog shelters. I said, I do care about that, but it's not the same as kids, and adopting a dog from a shelter is not the same as adopting a kid, and doesn't make you an adoptive parent. She hung up on me and blocked me on Facebook. Did I say something wrong? Am I the jerk here? Edit. I didn't invite her specifically. I reposted the event to my Facebook page, and my sister messaged and asked me to invite her. And this was not a conversation type thing. It was a presentation put on by the group leader/agency rep, so I didn't think she would have much time to talk. And also, I thought this would help her learn more about actual adoption and how different it is to animal adoption. Edit 2. I do understand what it's like to have a dog and how they're like a baby in some ways. I have 4. But I still would never compare the adoption of my dogs to the adoption of my daughters. Well, who do you agree with? OP or their sister? Please let us know. I wish I had a corgi. Am I the jerk because I won't give an employee 6 weeks off to be with his newborn? I'm looking for moral judgment since I know I'm legally in the clear. I'm the GM of a small grocery store. Because of how small our store is and how limited our hours are, we can only afford to keep a staff of 5 plus myself. Dave joined our staff about 4.5 months ago. He's a very quiet man, and he does not discuss his life outside of work. He doesn't actually say much at all. All he's really said about himself is that he's new to the area and he's in his early 20s. His performance has been, at best, slightly below average. He has a problem being on time for shifts, and he has a tendency to ask to leave early on days where he's been late. He does the basic bare minimum of his duties. Dave spoke to me yesterday and revealed to me that not only is he married, but his wife is pregnant and her due date is this coming Wednesday. He asked me to give him at least 4 weeks off to be at home with her, but he would prefer I give him 6 weeks. I was shocked because none of us knew he was married, let alone with a kid on the way. I told him I'd review his request and let him know. The rule at this store has always been that time off requests must be given with a minimum 2 weeks notice. I tell new hires this multiple times during the onboarding process, and Dave was informed of this several times. I'm also annoyed because Dave's had 4 months to speak to me about time off, and he waited until literally 4 days before he needed the time off. I work 6 days a week at the store, and I'm always available in person or on the phone. To give Dave his time, I'd have to hire someone to take his place and train them, and to me, that just didn't seem fair to anyone to hire someone for a month to 6 weeks and then let them go. But we just don't have the ability to keep Dave and a new hire and the rest of my staff. Now, we've had staff ask for time off before, and we can handle a 2 or 3 week absence, but 6 weeks is too much to ask of my staff. It isn't fair on them. I spoke to Dave today and told him I couldn't give him the time off he asked for, but that I could give him 2 weeks off. I later offered 3 weeks, and then give him a reduced schedule for as long as he needed so he could still be with his family and make money. Dave was shockingly angry when I denied his request. Like, he was annoyed. He was furious. He began accusing me of being unfair and said that if a woman had asked me for the time off to have a baby, I'd have given it to her. I informed him that when I gave birth to my child, I was only able to take off 3 weeks. And we've only had one other employee take maternity, and she was able to take a month before she told me she'd need the time off with about 5 months of notice. Dave went back to work in a bad mood. Members of staff said he was bad-mouthing me. I'm not going to fire him at this time because I'm sure he's stressed enough as it is. But was I the jerk for not giving him exactly what he wanted? Edit. We're in North Carolina, where we do not have a paid family leave for anyone other than state employees, and in cases where the business offers it. FMLA only qualifies if your business has a certain number of employees, the employee has worked a certain amount of hours in a 12-month period, and the employee gave 30 days notice for the request. The most I have the ability to offer an employee is unpaid leave, but I don't legally have to guarantee employment. That said, I would never take advantage of this law. Well, what do you think? Is OP the jerk, or is Dave? Please let us know. I'd fire Dave in a heartbeat. The guy sounds like a real piece of work. You're not gonna believe what happens in this video, so please come watch it next and we'll see you when you get there. And huge shout out to our newest official channel member, Lola. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. It really means the world to us. Join as a channel member today and we'll give you a special shout out in our next video. And why not have us make a video reading your script? Just head over to our Fiverr, link pinned in the comments below.